Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Loanology, the Jonathan Wells podcast. Today, we have with us Tosh Chandy, who is a real estate attorney that I've worked with in the past, actually. So wanted to take this opportunity here to interview him, talk about, all things real estate law when it comes to Illinois transactions, and also, any recent developments in the market that we've seen, from a consumer standpoint, and how those new laws that are going into effect or have already gone into effect will ultimately control the consumer buying process. So without further ado, Tosh, welcome to the floor.
Good morning, John. Attorney Tosh Chandy. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself, your background, how long you've been practicing law, things like that?
Okay, so I'm not someone who's been an attorney for generations. I've been an attorney for about 6 years. Prior to becoming an attorney, I was a licensed real estate. We called it an agent or a broker after that. So I was about a realtor for about 7-8 years. Prior to that, I worked in politics. Prior to that, I worked in corporate finance. Prior to that, I was a trader. I was an equities options trader.
Wow. I actually didn't know that. That's a pretty extensive background.
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in finance and a master's in quantitative finance in DePaul. So.
Nice. Absolutely. So how does that...
Lives, right?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I say completely different lives, but I think it's coming together now. So
yeah, absolutely. So why did you choose to pivot from, those different careers now into being an attorney?
So when I became a realtor, it was kind of just on happenstance. I had worked on a national political campaign. I came back to Chicago after a year away from Chicago, and I'm kind of a lifelong Chicago. I lived in Chicago since I was 3 in the city itself. So when I came back in 2009, end of 08-09, two friends of mine were going to get the real estate license. So I took the course with them, just something to do. It's like something we did on the weekends, on Saturdays. And I took the test, and I immediately started selling real estate. I worked at a company called Dreamtown. At the time, it had the best lead generation system, I think probably one, and if not the nation, at least in Chicago. And we literally got leads, a couple hundred leads a day.
Oh, wow.
So I started, my first sale was a cash transaction, 6123 Woodlawn for $280,000 cash. My first showing. Showed one property, they offered cash, and I said, wow, this is pretty good. I'm like, this is $7,000 in my pocket. So I went from there, did a lot of downtown, South Loop, West Loop, 1-bed, 2-bed condos, kind of simple transactions. I then moved to Baird & Warner. I moved, and I kind of developed my own pipeline of business. I went to Kale Realty, which is kind of a flat fee brokerage. They take a flat fee, and it worked out great. And something, I don't have to say something was missing, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I had always wanted to be an attorney. I kind of put it on the back burner. So what happened is I took the LSAT, and I said, if I take it seriously, I'll probably get either a full ride or a half ride scholarship. That was my goal. I said I would only go if one of those things happened, and that's what happened. So I got offered a full ride to 2 places and a half ride to Loyola, and I went to Loyola.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So, but to answer your original question, why did I want to be an attorney, is because on majority of my transactions that fell apart, I realized there was nothing I could have done differently. So whether it was the financing or something with the property itself, maybe a violation, maybe liens, I had done everything I could do, and the fact that I couldn't get paid and I couldn't control that outcome really bothered me. Mm-hmm. That's not to say an attorney can always get everything done, but at least you have some more tools in your toolbox than a realtor has.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So you did it for you wanted to have more control over the process and being able to be a bigger influence in that outcome. Nice. Absolutely. So what firm are you at? How long have you say you've been practicing law, I think, for about 7 years now.
I'm sorry.
I said, I believe you've been practicing law for about 7 years now, right?
Yeah,
perfect. And then do you run your own?
It's my own firm. Yeah, I launched my own firm about 2.5 years ago. Nice. I had worked at 2-3 other places shortly after that, mostly in real estate. I interned in law school at a firm that works with large unions. So we did not only real estate, but some other matters. But my firm itself does primarily real estate closings, residential and commercial, building violation cases, and civil lawsuits. So civil lawsuits and the business litigation part of my business, anything, partnership agreement, joint venture agreements, operating agreements, LLC agreements, 2 partners in a business, one's concealing the books. And these are longer civil suits. These can go on for years. Mm-hmm. And that's other part of my business. Yeah.
Nice.
No evictions before, because I know you're going to ask, do you do evictions? No. I have a whole story about evictions on why I don't do evictions. Right?
Well, let's hear it. I love good stories.
Okay, so I know you don't live in Chicago, but Chicago has something called the RLTO, so it's the Landlord Tenant Ordinance. So this is a specific statute introduced in Chicago that is on top of our general, landlord laws that we know, right, that you have in every state. So I'm not here going to be one of those people here that bash the city and bash this ordinance, because actually I know the person who wrote the ordinance. He was a professor of mine in law school, and he's a nice guy. But I will say, if you don't know what you're doing in the city as a landlord, there's a lot of professional tenants out here that will take advantage of this ordinance.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to evictions, it's not that I don't believe in an eviction. I just think it's such a horrible process for both parties. For the
Mhm.
person, even if they're taking advantage, like what they go through, sometimes they just don't have money. What the
Right.
landlord goes through, they don't get paid for. They pay this lawyer 2, 3 grand at a minimum. They have a case that may go, at a best case, 4 months, but it may end up 8 months or a year, and they still don't get any money. Even if they get a judgment, the eviction lawyer says, "Oh, good luck on getting your judgment. They don't work, so I don't know what you're going to collect from." Even if they
Mhm.
work, now you got to hire another attorney to do a wage garnishment, to do an attachment. This. I don't understand the strategy. No, that's not to knock eviction attorneys. There's two attorneys I work with. I can mention them if you want, Adrian Zeno and Bob Longcart. They both are very good at their job. They have figured out this ordinance, and they've figured out not a loophole, but a strategy to get you through these cases quicker. For me to do those cases and to spend that kind of time, I would have to charge $4,000 or $5,000 for an eviction. They have the strategy down and they're firm down to do it, where they can do it much cheaper. So it doesn't make sense for me to offer evictions to my clients. It doesn't, as one man operation. So what I do is cash for keys, agreed orders, and a lot of landlords have a problem with this. Why would I pay somebody money who hasn't paid me money?
Mhm.
And I say, well, that's true. But if somebody's motivated by money and needs money, and you say, here's $2,000, here's 50, can you please leave? And they leave and take their stuff with you without trashing your place, you can now rent your unit out, right? So
Mhm.
that just makes sense to me. If they will be motivated by that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually have a deal going right now.
Yeah.
We got the deal under contract in June. We're supposed to close out in July,
Mhm.
and the seller, for whatever reason, waited until we were in final approval to issue a notice to his tenant, because it's a condo downtown, that he's selling the property and the tenant needs to
Mm.
leave. Well, the tenant, obviously understands the law and everything, so he's milking every single day that he can. Like, they served him, the notices and everything. I think that he has
Mhm.
until November 15th, I believe, to leave the property. So until then,
Okay.
my buyer, he's a first time home buyer. He lives at home right now, so it's not like he needs to move, immediately.
Okay.
And that particular unit in that particular building is the only place that he wants to purchase that's on the market currently. So unless something comes up, that's on
Okay.
the market between now and November, he's still going to be purchasing
Mhm.
that unit. So we've been in final approval for almost 3 months now, just waiting on this tenant to move out.
And nobody
And
can get. And guess what? Nobody can get paid.
yeah,
That's the crazy part.
exactly.
Nobody. You, the realtor, the attorney, the
Yeah,
buyer, is that nobody's getting paid based on that
no,
one guy's action.
exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, I was even talking with the buyer's agent, the buyer's attorney, saying like, hey, is there any way we could do cash for keys, or is there anything we can do to like motivate the seller to like
Right.
get this guy out? And no, there's really nothing we could do. We're just waiting until, he has to legally move out. So,
Yeah. That's the crazy. I mean, I've all kinds of crazy stories. I had a client who called me 2 weeks ago, and they're renting. They're actually a client of mine who owns 3 multi-unit properties in the city.
mhm,
But what this individual does is, while he's rehabbing them, he buys them and he starts working on, because he doesn't work himself. He
mhm,
goes and finds a short-term rental downtown. Okay. 'Cause he's not going
mhm,
to live in these properties. These properties are in some challenged areas, but he makes money on them. Short-term leases, Facebook. There are people leasing places through Facebook. Okay. These are nice
sure.
places. They're expensive places, but there's no protocol. So he calls me and says, I got a problem. My landlord in my condo, we signed a 4 month or 3 month with one extension lease at $4,000 a month, but they're telling me I have to leave in 2 weeks. And this is the first month of this lease.
Sure.
I said, what? So I call the owner, and the owner tells me, you don't know what you're doing. I don't know where you went to law school at, but you don't know the law. Yes, he has to leave. I said, well, hold on a minute. It seems to me you've signed a sublease agreement. So she was renting from someone else. And I looked at the sublease agreement, and the title says sublease agreement. To which he
Gotcha.
says, that's not a valid agreement. I said, but you initiated and gave it to him. I mean, this is the
Right.
kind of level of person I'm dealing with. So I said, how are we going to get out? So what she ended up doing is deactivating his key fob so he wouldn't be able to get into the building and to the garage. So now you have an individual who's given her $4,000 and can't get into his condo. So I said, what can we do here? But I like this kind of stuff. I live for this. So I said, police, they're not going to do anything. We called the building manager who hung up on me. And so I said, what am I going to do? So I called the owner. I said, okay, I'm going to file a civil litigation action. Okay. Because what you're doing now has repercussions. Okay. It's this guy's life. Answer. Oh, do what you want. So I filed the lawsuit and I sent her e-filed and I sent her a copy. She says, you can stay now for 3 months. I said, okay, very good. We're back to how things were. I said, make sure that key fob is active. And she went active back. But these people are just acting recklessly, man.
Oh, for sure.
They're people with money. These are not dumb people. It's like they're scam artists.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah. No, it's insane. Yeah.
So my client had to pay me and to find he was in out $1,500 or $2,000. And some lawyers would charge more. And why should he have to do that? But it was better option sitting outside or going to a hotel.
Right. No, for sure. Well, and it leads me to that point too, where like, I think that there are some states like Indiana is one of them where I practice a lot of, my lending, and we don't have attorneys in Indiana. I mean, there are real estate attorneys, but it's not customary to use one on your transaction when you purchase. Right. And so I just find it really interesting that there are so many cases out there of people that are just, for lack of a better term, shitty, that you need to have, you need to cover yourself by working with a real estate attorney.
I'm surprised. When I hear these stories, people call me. I said, what are you talking about? You gave somebody $4,000 because of a Facebook post? You wired money? Yeah. I said, don't do that. That's not how you rent places. You don't even know what this is. But people do this, especially younger people under 30. And I think that's where you're going to see a shift, even with this whole settlement. Now, are you people going to use buyer agents? People under 25, 28, 30, like they're coming from out of town and they want to rent a one-bed downtown because they're going to medical school near Northwestern. They will see a Facebook post and wire $3,000, $4,000 from the account. And the place may not even exist.
Right, exactly. Or, it could exist, but you can easily, grab pictures online, make your own Facebook post.
The place exists, but I think it doesn't exist for that person to rent that out. They don't own it.
Right, yeah. I mean, I could create a listing right now for any home in America to rent out.
So my cousin did this actually. So I mean, it's just, and he was distraught about it. He doesn't have tons of money. I said, dude, what are you doing? I'm a whole realtor and attorney here. I don't know. I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy. I saw it. It was convenient. It looked like a great price. I'm like, do you even know this person's name? Did you have any conversation with them? No, just some text. But I mean, this is how young people think. They move quick. They like to do stuff themselves. They don't think, let me call a realtor. Let me call a Coldwell banker and ask them to show me 3 condos this weekend. That's how their parents probably think. Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's go into that a little bit more. There's obviously, we had the NAR settlement that just went into place on the 17th of August. Can you explain for the viewers, like exactly what that is? I'm sure, we've probably beat this conversation, dead already, but I want to reevaluate this with you and then also kind of show, now that we've been practicing it this way for a little over a month, like how has your experience been with, the recent changes?
Okay, so if we want to start from the beginning, there was a lawsuit brought by a class action lawsuit brought by a plaintiff firm in, I think, Kansas or in Kentucky, and they specialize in plaintiff class actions. Okay, so they filed the case, and the general premise behind it, in a kind of very simple layman's term, is that when an individual sells their property with a licensed realtor, right, and decides a commission, whatever it can be, they, 2 people have a discussion. I'm going to sell your house. I'm going to charge you 6%. Okay. The listing agent signs that agreement with the seller. When the buyer shows up with the buyer's agent, there's some kind of co-op, what we call co-op commission, listed on the MLS that is in the remarks that says what they'll give the buyer's realtor. Could be 2%, could be 3%. It's not set by law. The premise of this case was, which is an interesting premise, is that nobody understands how this works and nobody knew this was working. Now, of course, people do, but a lot of realtors didn't explain it, right? They go sign a listing. The buyer says, oh, cool, this guy's taking me around for free to show houses, and I'm writing an offer. I didn't pay any commission. I don't even know if the buyers realize the seller's paying that part of that. Some do at the closing, some don't. They just think, all right, this is a service that the buyer does. So the premise is that there should be more transparency. So they removed the MLS co-op commission. Now every buyer, before they take out their buyer, every buyer's agent prior to taking out their buyer must sign a buyer's broker agreement that stipulates what commission the buyer's agent requires, right? So say they put 3% on there. If the listing agent's only offering 2%, that buyer needs to come up with that additional 1%. So the buyer has their down payment, closing costs, plus now they have this 1% in commission. All right, this might be a little problem for somebody who doesn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that can happen is that they put down 3% on the buyer agreement, and say the listing agent's paying, well, let's say they put down 2.5, and the listing agent's paying 3. You can't get 3. You can only get what's on that agreement. So you lose the other half. So it's an interesting turn of events. So what will actually happen practically? What I've seen so far, I haven't seen a lot of changes in how people conduct transactions in our market. So meaning people are not just frantically calling listing agents. Buyers aren't calling listing agents directly and saying, hey, can you show me the house? I don't want to pay a buyer. That's not happening. This is kind of happening as usual. Realtors are sometimes everything's kind of moving smoothly. The problem you're seeing now, though, with some realtors that I work with is that because I do a lot of buy-side closings, is they call the listing agent and they say, hey, because this is what you have to do now, because it's not an MLS. Just curious, I'd like to show your property at 600 North Lakeshore, your one-bed condo. Okay, cool. When? On Thursday, 3 o'clock. Okay, that's fine. I'll meet you there. Hey, what are you offering for commission? Hey, don't worry about that. They hang up I don't know. Just bring an offer, because they don't want to disclose that, and they don't have to disclose that by law. This is what I'd like people to know, and people think they do, because some brokers think, oh, they don't have to tell you that. That's between them and their client. So when you write that offer in, you want to stipulate in your offer, okay, I'm writing this up for $425,000. Okay, subject to a 2.5% co-op, right?
Gotcha.
You need to include that in your offer, because now that realtor has to take that to their seller and say, hey, here's an offer for you. It's a good offer, but they're going to need 3%. And you said you're not giving anything. You're only paying me. You're not going to pay them. So what do you want to do? And that has to be negotiated. But if you don't negotiate that and you come to that closing, I've had a couple closings this month, where people didn't know what's happening. These realtors just put this 3% on here and they're paying 2%. And the buyer at the closing said, what is this 1%? I mean, I explained it. I said, yeah, here's an additional commission that you're paying. They said, I'm not paying that. I don't want to pay that. Nobody told me about that. I says, so now I got to call the realtor. I said, did you have this discussion? Well, I mean, they signed the buyer broker agreement. I said, no, that's not a discussion. Telling someone to sign this, it's not. This is the whole point of the lawsuit. Right. So I had one client who really pushed back hard on it. So the realtor took it off. She's like, whatever, take it off. She's like, I'm not saying that. So I mean, it's there has to be a lot of education, John. And then there's stuff in the news. There's misinformation all over the place. There's brokerages who are trying to give good classes and training out. There's some that are not, and there's. I'm on the Forms and Contracts Committee for Association of Realtors. So we made the forms. There's stuff on the website that will walk you through it. There's instructional videos, but you got to there's more flexibility in how you negotiate deals now. Let me just put it that way, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, for sure. I mean, so from let's go back to, kind of the beginning of that summary there. Let's say that you're a buyer, you're going to be working with your real estate agent, right? And your real estate agent has you sign their buyer's agency agreement stating that they're going to make 3%, from the sales price of the home that you purchase, right? Is there, let's say I find my dream home, I'm a first-time home buyer, I've got everything falls in line, but the seller is only offering 2.5%, and I don't have the extra 0.5%. At that point, am I able to negotiate with my agent for them to drop their commission from 3% to 2.5%?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And I think if you're a prudent realtor, you'll drop that.
Yeah, for sure. I think so too. From
why
a lending
hold
standpoint.
up your client's transaction?
Exactly. Yeah. No, for sure.
I mean, there's ways now you can put in seller credits to cover that too. Right.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So then, the other thing from my standpoint as a consumer, right? I think that, obviously to your point, there's no real way to advertise what the seller is going to be paying for any buyer's, commission, if there is any, right? In Indiana, it's a little bit more, I would say, small towny, right? For lack of a better term,
Right,
where
yeah.
you can just call somebody. There's no like, people aren't hiding behind, the walls of the brokerages that they're at, or
Or the
the
MLS.
the
Right, right,
listings, the MLS or whatever. Exactly, right? People know everybody, and you're able to network a little bit more out there. So,
right.
in Indiana, it's typically, if you pick up the phone and call the listing agent, you'll get an idea of what they're giving for, buyer's
Yeah,
agency commissions and whatnot,
right.
right?
That makes sense.
So case in point, I'm actually in the middle of selling my home right now.
Oh, yeah?
And when I listed it with a 4% total commission, right? That's what I talked to my agent about. My home sale price is a little bit on the higher end. So even though it's 4%, it's still going to pay out a good amount of money to both sides, right? The real estate agent comes in with her client, first showing that we had, they
Mhm.
love it. She writes up an offer and asks for 2.5%, right?
So now your guy's
Now,
stuck with 1.5 if he goes right.
well, exactly, right? So at that point, I'm like, okay, well, my real estate agent's a good friend of mine. He's the first agent that ever like sent me business. That's why I use him for all my personal
Okay.
deals and everything else. So, I was talking about like, I don't want to short you, and only pay you 1.5. So I was like, let's counter back on all these other items, and I don't want to, just pay this agent 2.5% either. But I also know who this agent is in our industry and in our marketplace. She closes a ton of business. She's well respected. I know that she's going to keep her buyer in check. They're not going to walk away for something stupid. Like we're going to keep this deal
Right,
together because she's on the other side, right?
right.
So I was like, you know
So
what? That's worth
there's some value to that then, right?
exactly. It's like that's worth the extra 0.5% for me. I was like, let's get this price here, and then that's basically going to pay for that extra half of a percent, and then I'll be willing to give it to her if we can do that, right? And so we ended up coming to terms on that. But to your point, I think that I really like where it promotes more collaboration and more negotiation between
Yeah.
all the parties that are involved.
Mhm.
And I think that at the end of the day, if if you have a real estate agent, or if you are a real estate agent, that all you're doing is saying, here's my buyer's agency, agreement. You're going to sign here. And then now I'm going to get, 3% regardless of whatever happens. And I'm just doing this, showing you a couple homes and then whatever. Like a lot of those people should be weeded out of the industry anyways. And it's only going to help promote more, like just a better overall experience for the buyer at the end of the day.
So I agree with you. And when I was a full-time realtor, that's the way I'd like to do my transactions. But I will
Mhm.
tell you, and it's not to disparage the industry, or at least the Chicagoland industry, but I find in terms of total, say all, I'm only going to talk about Chicago. I don't know really what happens in all the suburbs, but in Chicago itself, like Chicago and the South Side, West Suburb, the percentage of realtors I would say who like to work that way is less than 40%. I don't want
Oh
to say
yeah.
25, but it's not even half. So when I used to do deals, I didn't call and tell people, oh, my client's bottom line is this, and they're getting divorced. I didn't disclose stuff like this that we're not allowed to, right? But I did say, listen, that number you got, that's not going to work. It's just not. Like, you're putting this offer in. I don't want you to like do these disclosures and waste time. I used to tell some realtors, like, what price are you guys at before you fill out all this paperwork and send it over? You know what I mean?
Right.
And if they're 100 grand less, I said, there's no point to do this. Like, there's no
Right.
way. Like, yeah. Or sometimes they were so close where I would say, you know what? And this is controversial too, John. And realtors hate this, but I would say, you know what? It's a $400,000 or $500,000 place. I'm making $10,000 to $12,000. I will contribute $1,500 towards the closing. I do
Oh,
not
for
want
sure.
like because it becomes an emotional circus.
Right.
People are like mad, the buyer and seller. Oh, they can't give me $1,000. Well, why not? They can't fix a stair rail. Why not? I mean, they can't. They should have done that already. Why they can't fix this leak in the tub? I said, what are you guys doing? I can
Yeah.
tell you there's a story where I went to a final walkthrough and a jacuzzi tub was leaking, the faucet. Okay. This is like a $400 fixture on the jacuzzi. It's like a Growy or a Hansgrohe faucet. The wife says, I'm not closing with that leak. They should have fixed that. I said, okay, that's fine. I called the listing agent. My clients were buying it. Okay. I called the listing agent and I says, why didn't you guys fix the faucet? That's in the request, the turn review request. Oh, my clients, they're not fixing that faucet. They can't even find that faucet. They don't have time to find that faucet. They're getting a great deal. Like, it's a drip, man. Come on. Which is kind of true. It's a
Right.
beautiful
Right.
home. It's a little drip, right?
Right. No,
But my
exactly.
client's wife was adamant that she has to get her way. So
Mhm.
we were in a walkthrough. We come outside. So I thought, okay, now I have no help from the listing agent. I have no help from the lender. The lender's like, are we closing? Are we closing? The attorney's like, are we
Mhm.
closing? Are we closing? I said, everyone relax. I took the
Yep.
husband to the side. I said, look, man, how much? Let's Google this faucet. This was like in 2008 or 10. I think I had a BlackBerry or I don't know what phone I had. It was loading.
The old Blackberries,
the
baby.
BlackBerry with not the
Hell
curve,
yeah.
the bold, the BlackBerry Bold, which is a great phone. It's like
Yeah.
scrolling down, and we're looking at eBay listings slowly outside.
Nice.
It's at 9 o'clock in the evening. That's like 285 used. I said, listen, I will give you $300. Okay.
Yep.
He's like, right now? I was like, yeah, right now. Will your wife be okay? Oh yeah, I'll make sure she's okay. We went to the ATM. I gave him that $300. He called his trainer. He's like, yeah, we can close tomorrow. We can fund. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I really didn't say thank you. The lender said thank you. The attorney's like, that's kind of cool. But like, why are we getting so caught up? And deals actually fall apart. I've seen realtors who don't want to work together, and they're like, oh, I'm not buying. And send a cancellation. And I hate the attorneys that say send a cancellation. And I realized when I become a real estate attorney, I'm never going to be that attorney. Send a cancellation. Send a cancellation. Like, what are you guys doing? A lot of people's livelihood are at stake here. These realtors won't get paid. The lender won't get paid. Nobody's getting paid. You know, your attorney send a cancellation because a lot of attorneys look at it, it's $500, $600 for closing, whatever. I'm doing 30 of them, 20 of them. So I think, and I'm not trying to boast about how I do my business, but I think that's a benefit for using me because I've been that realtor that I've seen 15 grand, 18 grand vanish into sky over something small.
Right.
And that was the realtor saying, like, what, can't we split our commission? Can't you give $2,000? I give $2,000. Is it better to get 12 than nothing? Right. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't care. I'm not doing it. Okay. Well, don't do it then.
Yeah. No,
and,
for sure.
And once your client is, and once your client's upset, it's hard to bring them back.
Oh yeah. No, for sure.
After they've looked for 4 months and done inspection and paid for appraisals, inspections, and now, they can't get their house. Some people are mad. They're like, I don't want a house. I had a client say, I don't want a house. We're not buying a house. You're not buying a house. Yeah, no, we're not buying a house. Okay. So.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I've definitely had that happen before where like, you communicate to your team and saying, hey, if this deal does not close, this buyer's not going to, they're not going to buy a house. Like they're so fed up with the process. They still want the house. And it's just, most of the time when buyers and sellers even get upset, it's an emotional response to a short-term problem. Right.
Right.
So for example, with, on the mortgage side, it could be that they're frustrated with the documentation they need to gather, right? Short-term issue. Once they're in the house, they're going to forget they ever had to get that documentation over to me, right?
You're absolutely right. And when they tell me, they end up calling me for all these things. I'm like, why are you calling me? Call the lender. Oh, they don't return my call. I said, well, what's your issue? Can you help me go over this? I said, go over what? That's your loan application. Just answer it correctly. Okay, fine. But I mean, it's legal. I mean, yeah, it's legal. Just, you got to answer it. Okay. This is a condition for you to get this loan. Just like you go buy a car. You have to disclose these things. You have to answer these questions. Okay, fine. Like, you're buying a house. You're not buying a pair of shoes.
Right.
You're like, did you expect it to be a process? That blows my mind with some, and I'm not insulting first-time buyers. And it doesn't happen all the time, but once in a blue moon, I get like a first-time buyer who's so frustrated with the fact that they have to get pay stubs and tax returns. Mm-hmm. I said, that's frustrating to you that you have to call HR and get pay stubs? Or you have to log in ADP? That's frustrating right now?
Yeah.
Well, can you help me with that? No, I can't help you with that.
No, for real. I got a client.
I'm like, ask the realtor to help you with that. I can't do that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I have a client right now, even we're working on closing him out by the end of the month. And, he keeps blowing up my phone and sending emails and whatnot about the fact that he's gotten us all of his documents. I'm like, no, you haven't. Like, we've clearly responded to you 5 times in the last 2 days.
All these deals, John, could be closed and funded in less than 3 weeks.
Oh, for sure. Every single deal could be
in 2 weeks. I had a client that got a clear to close in less than 10 days, like 8 days. I think it was 7 or 8 business days, less than 2 weeks. Because the minute they got something, they're like, they went online.
Yep.
Got the credit. They had to explain something on the credit. They wrote that up, drafted it up really quick. I mean, that's how you should do something. If you want
for sure.
That's what I would do. Whatever you're going to give me, I'm going to be like the dolphins at Brookfield Zoo. You know the dolphin show? The hoops? Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. No, exactly. 100%. So, so I think that, to our points here, more collaboration with agents, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see, as we keep going through this process, because it's still new, right? We're in this 30 days for most markets of changes in negotiations and compensation, everything else. I would love to see, more collaboration. agents being able to come together and figure out creative solutions to get, both the buyer and the seller to the closing table. Because again, that's why you're hiring a real estate agent. If you're going to be, handling all the issues yourself, then you should just go for sale by owner at that point. Right.
Or on the buy side, you should get into, and I know people don't want to hear this, you should get onto Zillow, and you should do your due diligence, figure out the listing agent, and you should write them an email, phone call that says, I'm purchasing your home. Here's my offer.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
and
100%.
they can take your offer, or not take your offer.
Right. So I want to get your input on this. How do you see this affecting the compensation to buyer's agents and listing agents, and like the overall cost associated with selling a home? So for example,
bring it down.
Not to put all my information out there, but the home that I'm selling is, the final price is over $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And my commission, like the total fee for me paying on both these agents, it's expensive. And so looking at this as a consumer, I'm like, okay, well, is there, like, my house sold in the first 48 hours, 72 hours.
Have I received $25,000 to $30,000 worth of service?
Right.
That's your question.
Exactly. That's the question.
Okay,
100%.
So if we go down this road right now, you're going to really think this is funny. Okay. When I started as a realtor and I did that first sale, and they were such a nice little couple at University of Chicago. Okay. They had a little baby, and they had cash. They were 4 students. They had cash. They bought that place for $300,000, and I made $7,000. I went home. I think I got wired the money the next day. I got that check, and I had done many things before in life. I had sold suits at Marshall Fields, so I've made quick money commission. Mm-hmm. When you're selling suits at Marshall Fields on State Street, and you sell 3 suits, and you get, whatever you get for $6,000, you get like $400, $500. But you do this like for 6 to 8 hours, you could have checks that are $1,500, $2,000. Okay, for part-time commission. So I've made money, but this kind of money, this was like 2 hours of work, and I had made $7,000. I felt guilty. I remember telling my parents, like, this job doesn't even make sense to me. But then my parents said, well, look, you're not going to get that every day, probably. You're not going to get that every hour. I said, well, that is true, right? And I realized I took out a lot of leads, and I spent a lot of time paying for parking and going here and doing this, and I didn't make anything so much. So I realized it. And this was always the rationale that realtors used and managed brokers used. Well, yeah, you're making money, but you're not going to make that every day. You know what I mean? You're just going to be a lot of deals that don't go through, a lot of shorts. But like, to your point, from the seller's perspective, I used to think that's a lot of money. I had a client who sold their house in Naperville. Okay. They bought a townhouse in the South Loop. This was my biggest one-day transactions. It was 7-something and 8-something. I think I walked with almost $36,000, $38,000. Okay. I thought to myself, did he receive $38,000 worth of help from me? He showed his own house in Naperville, actually. I didn't drive to Naperville to show a house. I negotiated a good price for him. His townhome in the South Loop, they knew the specific block they wanted that townhouse development. When it came on the market, they said they'll take it. I said, I feel guilty. I feel bad. And at the closing, I told him, I said, he's like, Tosh, you had a good day today. I said, yeah, that's a pretty good day, for a couple hours of work. He says, well, it's okay. You're a nice guy. I said, all right. Of course, he didn't pay the on the purchase. So he only paid the other half. You know what I mean? So he's like, right. Yeah. And he subsequently bought 3-4 other places from me. And he didn't feel bad about it. But I thought, I don't think I've provided $30,000 worth of service. I just don't think I have.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm for your point. And I know realtors don't want to hear this. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And especially for younger people, for people who don't have the time, who don't have the knowledge, who are coming from out of town, other states, it's a very useful thing to them, right?
Right.
Whether it costs $30,000, $50,000, I don't think they care. It's part of the cost of the process of buying a house. But for younger people, my cousin's age, who are professionals, lawyers and doctors and engineers, who make good money, who like to do things themselves, like go on Carvana and buy a BMW 5 Series, they find it problematic to spend $30,000, $40,000 to sell a $600,000, $700,000 house. They just do. My cousin told me. My cousin the house in cash. She's like, I don't know what we gave this guy $30,000 for. I don't know what he did.
Right.
He didn't show the house. He had a photographer. He put online. He got an offer the first week. We closed in 3 weeks. I never saw him. Yeah. I said, hey, well, he's a top performing agent. She's like, that's true.
Yeah. Well, and like, to be completely fair, right? So for example, I was talking about this with a buddy of mine who recently, purchased a new home as well. And, he's more of that mindset, young professional. He's a VP at the company that he works for. So he runs like the operational side of things. And so he's just very data minded and everything else. And so, his biggest like issue is professionalism with, a few different buyer's agents that were showing his property, right? Which totally understandable. So he's got this like thought process in his mind about every realtor because of interactions with a few that just were not very professional, right?
Right.
And so, his whole thing is like, he's like, well, it's like, I think that real estate agents should be paid on the listing side, basically like the more like paid out directly correlated to the amount of effort they put in for marketing, right? So for example, let's say that, it takes you 6 months to sell a home. Well, your fee for selling it in 6 months is going to be larger than your fee is for selling it in, 1 weekend, right? And my counterpoint to him, just, because I like to have conversations with people about almost everything and look at it from all different angles, is if you do it that way, and if you pay based on, you're not paying on the result, you're paying on the time. Well, in that case, then no agent would be incentivized
There's
to
no
sell a
incentive
home.
to sell cells quickly, right? Correct.
Exactly. You're not going to sell it quickly because you're going to want to basically incur billable hours, if you will, right?
So to your point, and I'm glad that CAR did this. When I say CAR, it's the Chicago Association of Realtors, because I know you may have listeners in Indiana. Like I said, I'm on the Forms and Contracts Committee, and what they've done now and what we developed that we'll release shortly on these listing agreements is very smart, and on the buyer broker agreement. So now it's not just, okay, it's 5%, or it's 6% on the listing side. What it is there's several variations and stipulations on how to be paid, right?
Okay.
So there may be payments for marketing. There may be payments for this. There may be payments that are due even if you don't close, right? There may be upfront payments for staging. So now I think it's more transparent to the seller where they say, okay, well, you're right. You did put $2,000 worth of furniture in this place, right? Why should you have to eat that cost? It didn't sell. Or you did have a photographer. You did have this. You did do marketing throughout the community and spent like $700 on printed material, right? So they can see that. And everybody can walk away with a sense of worth, right? The listing agent just say, oh man, I spent $3,000 up front. I didn't sell the place, right? That used to be the old model. You just did it thinking, I'm going to sell it. But if you didn't sell it, you or your company ate the cost. A bigger company will eat the cost. A Cola Banker, Bear Noir, they can eat that cost. A smaller brokerage, they won't eat the cost. So now the agent's out of that money,
Yep.
They're like, man, I spent that money. So I think there are ways to, and let's back up. I'm not saying that there's no circumstances where I believe a listing agent's worth $30,000, $40,000. There's plenty of situations. There's situations where people are too busy. There's situations where people don't have the time or effort, don't know what's going on in the market. There's times for people from out of state. There's times when people are first-time buyers and they just are not comfortable with this process, right? Every personality is not like you and me, John. Everyone doesn't want to like research every detail and figure out everything and go. Some people just say, hey, you're a professional. I have a client that always says, let me stay in my lane. He's like, let me stay in my lane. And that's what he does. He's a fire lieutenant. He goes to work. Okay. And this is what he likes to do. And he says, Tosh, you're a realtor, you're an attorney, whatever you say, man, it's fine. So there's value to that if it makes him sleep well. Right.
Yeah.
I can't put a price on that. To me, that may look outrageous. To him, that's worth $30,000.
Right.
So I don't want all these realtors to get in your comments and say, "What's this guy talking about?" He's horrible.
No, definitely. Well, and like,
and I
go ahead.
I do quite a few closings. So I mean, I do 15, 20, 25 closings a month, mostly on the buy side. So this is my business model. But my business model is also not just to provide a realtor somebody to do an attorney review letter. It's to say, hey, buyer, do you want to put this in a land trust because it's commercial property? Do you want your LLC to have, a joint venture agreement? Because now you have a partner too, right? So like I have one right now closing tomorrow. And this woman said, my other attorney never told me about this stuff when I bought my other space. It's still in me and my husband's name. I said, what? You have a storefront and you and your husband's name? What kind of liability is that? She's like, I don't know. I said, what if somebody falls? What if the roof collapsed on somebody when they're taking takeout food?
Right.
I said, that's all your assets. It is? I said, yeah. I said, what did your attorney tell you? Nothing. He just said it's it's $750 for the closing. I said, oh my gosh. And it's not to make money. It's just because people really don't know.
Right.
They unless professionals like and they're big, big investors, they don't know.
Right. No, for sure. Well, and again, to bring it back to the last point, neither you nor myself are against real estate agents, right? We both work with real estate agents a lot. We both believe that a professional real estate agent is one of the best things, one of the best people you can have in your corner as a buyer or a seller.
For life, and for your family's life.
100%. It's more so of the fact that, like, okay, the whole industry itself is, was overdue for some, revamp, right?
The only industry, think about this. If we look, like, go back like 40 years or 30 years. Okay, and that's not too far. That's 80s. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's like when I'm born. This is one of the few industries that has not advanced.
Right.
And NAR can say what they want. Okay.
Mhm.
And people at car NAR get mad at me and say, well, we're a trade group. We're not a union. Okay. But here's the thing. Look how you buy a vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. My parents just bought a car. When they went to that dealership, they knew exactly the vehicle they were going to buy based on the website. They knew the color, the options, the price, everything. They went there and said, that's the car we'll take. And the salesman did not show a whole bunch of other cars and say, well, maybe you want this other one. The salesmen don't even do that anymore at a car dealership.
Right.
Well, maybe you want this bigger one. Maybe you want the electric one. He said, okay, let's write it up. Very good. Thank you. And he's very happy. He got paid.
Yep.
Everybody was happy. And there are people who would have bought that car. My cousin bought a car like that, didn't even go to the dealership. She said, I don't have time to go there. He says, no problem. We'll do the sale at your driveway. They showed up in her driveway and she had the loan right, and then we got the car.
Yeah.
So real estate's one of these few things where we're calling a realtor, we're walking around, we're looking at properties, we're chit-chatting, and then we're writing offers and we're getting accepted. And it's like, that's fine if you like doing that. But a lot of people don't have the time or energy to do that.
Yeah.
They say, especially in a market, in a city, maybe not in like St. John or Cherville, but in Streeterville, River North, if you want a 1-bed condo and specifically, I want to be in either of these 2 high rises and I want to face the lake, you're looking every day on Zillow for that unit to come on the market. Yep. And when unit 3202 comes on that market, that 1-bed, you want that unit.
Yep.
You don't know if you'll get it.
Yeah.
The price is wrong, but you will call the first realtor you see on that Zillow on the side ad and click that and say, I'll put an offer in, or let me show it to me. Put offer in. And that's how the business is going. And that's how the business will go. So these realtors who are young, who are on Instagram and who are doing the Google ads and the leads, these are the realtors that are going to make money. A lot of the realtors I work with are new realtors. Okay. They've been in this field for a year or 2 years and they're making a killing. Yeah. It blows my mind that somebody will go on Instagram and say, oh, hey, I saw that place you sold. Actually, I'm looking to buy in that same building. Okay. Yeah. Here's a studio 1-bed. Okay. I'll take the studio. You'll take the studio. It's like they're buying, they're buying a pair of shoes. I can't make a studio because they know what they want. They've done the research. They have their peer approval. They know what they can afford. They're just a smart consumer. Yeah. Right. My parents couldn't buy a house like that, a condo. My dad won't even think about buying a condo like that.
Right. No, for sure. Well, and I think that to your point, if you are a real estate agent or any professional, honestly, in the real estate space, you have to grow essentially a following, right? Now that's got to be balanced between socials and in person. You can't just be 100% on social. You can't be 100% just in person, right? You have to have both. But that's how you're going to attract and build rapport with your clients, is by them being able to research you online. They see all your stuff. Now they know you're a verified source. You can get them the information that they need. And that just makes that whole process a lot easier. And cheaper too, right? Like, you're not spending a ton of money on print marketing anymore because you have a following that, is pretty much, once you have the following, like, it's free to maintain it. You just have to keep posting, right? And so, yeah, I think that, going forward, I do believe in the next 5 years, you will see, significant price improvements to the purchase and sale of a home.
And I know that was your original question, like 10 minutes ago. That's what I said. The price will, it will be cheaper to transact the property. Absolutely, it will be. Yeah, absolutely,
100%. Closing thoughts.
Okay, so I just want to say for buyers and sellers in the Chicagoland market, because that's what I know. I can't really speak to what happens in Indiana, but sure, if you're looking to buy, this is a good time to buy. And this is not me giving a sales pitch. Rates have come down. Properties are going to start coming on the market. There's going to be a lot more competition in the market. You're not going to be able to get the price you want. You're not going to negotiate these kind of seller credits and, give me $5,000 because there's 3 inspection items. It's not going to work. Okay. So if you're looking to buy and you've been waiting, you need to get into the market now. Now, of course, there's less inventory because it's wintertime. So for my clients who know specifically, the areas that they want to be in, like specific suburbs and school districts. If you don't find a property there, then wait, right? Because you know specifically where you need to be. But if you're someone who says, well, I just want a 1-bed condo in, anywhere between Roosevelt and whatever, Ohio and Lakeshore and like Halstead, and you find a good deal, get that deal.
Mhm.
This is why I tell my clients, and I don't practice a lot of real estate anymore. I do about 6-7 transactions a year for investors, but when I tell realtors who are having a hard time and they're showing people stuff, they're saying, well, I might wait. Explain to these buyers that price they're seeing, that's not going to be the price next spring. It's going to be significantly higher, whether it's 10 grand or 15 grand on a 300,000 place. That's a big difference, right? Are you able to get it now? And maybe they'll give you the parking space for 50 grand, write the offer up without the parking space. And if there's some issues in the condo or something, say, you know what, can you throw in the parking space? Right. It's got a separate pen, and maybe they'll give it to you. You never know. Like you say, try to be collaborative. You never know. I always just tell people, well, I'm not going to put that offer in because they want, that. I said, if it's close enough, just do it, because you never know that seller situation, right? Maybe they have to move. Maybe they've moved already. Okay. Maybe they're paying 2 mortgages in one another state, so you never know. So I said, just this whole, I'm going to wait because, I know what's best. I'm going to wait. You're never going to be able to time the market exactly because there's a lag time. You're never going to find the lowest point, just like a stock market. There's a lag time in all this stuff, right? So if it meets your needs, if you can afford the payment, right? If it's the area and the price you wanted, purchase, if not, wait. For sellers out there, it's a good time to sell. I mean, you see people putting properties on the market and they're going quickly. And the prime areas of Chicago, they're getting multiple offers. They're selling in less than 30 days. You know what I mean? And there was a realtor that had a client waiting to sell, and he's renting one place where he lives, and he has another property he wanted to sell. And he said, I'll wait till next spring because rates are going to come down. I told her to tell him, why does he care about that? That's not his concern.
Well, everybody, unfortunately, we lost Tosh here. I think there was some issues with, the connectivity from the Wi-Fi that he was on. However, I did want to say thank you all so much for watching today's interview with Tosh Chandy, who is obviously an attorney in the Chicagoland area. If you want to get a hold of him, I will put all the information for his contact info in the link in the description. And if you have any questions, or if you want to put a question on the podcast, please reach out, drop a comment. We'll get it featured in the next podcast. Thank you all so much for coming out, listening, and I appreciate you all. Make it a great day.